Bunny. Guess what book we're talking about today? Bunny by Mona Awad. Now, you know your girl be looking up booktube, weird books, bizarre books, disturbing books, and everyone had this book on their list. I experienced this book as one would experience a fever dream. Now, if you like your books to adhere to the rules of reality, if you like your books to explain to you exactly how things are working and what is happening and why, I must bid you adieu because that will not happen here. I really did enjoy this book. I feel that it is very creative and I just hadn't read anything quite like it. So I absolutely would recommend it. I'm a little unsure of how it's going to go for me trying to retell this book because I would often read a paragraph or a page and have to reread it to know if I was interpreting it in the way that the author meant it. The whole time, you're not for sure what's happening. Like, you think you know, but you kind of know you could be wrong. And in reading reviews of this book after the fact, everyone's like, I think this is what it is, but everyone kind of has differing opinions on that. So it should be a fun one to discuss. Hello, my name is Leah. This is my channel, Dirty Little Literate, where I like to talk about books that make me uncomfortable, whether they're awkward, weird, disturbing, bizarre. What a bizarre book this is. I'm so excited to talk about it, so let's get into it. So our main character, Samantha Heather Mackey, is in a graduate program for fiction writing, and in her cohort, it is her and 4 other girls. And these 4 other girls are known as the Bunnies. They call each other Bunny in essentially every sentence that they say to each other. It's very like, how are you, Bunny? I missed you, Bunny. No, I missed you, Bunny. I love you, Bunny. Your hair is so cute, Bunny. And the way that I was initially picturing these girls was very much in line with Legally Blonde or Clueless. But when they're actually described, I think my assumption was certainly off. And so it's definitely not necessarily just like tan, blonde, perfect everything. They definitely have their own sense of style. So they'll wear outfits with like decapitated kittens on them or just something equally absurd that you don't usually see on what you think of as like, you know, elite kind of high class preppy gals. And they're all rich and they all kind of have it all. They are a very tight-knit clique, and our main character, Samantha, hates them. You can imagine what it must be like being in a program with these girls and having to hear them ooey gooey drip all over each other with love all the time. They will get into these group hugs where they are hugging for so long, so tightly that, you know, it seems like their internal organs are going to explode. And so Samantha definitely resents them. Now, she has one best friend, Ava, who does not attend the same school as her. And Ava is very alternative, punk, goth, whatever you want to call it. She usually has like a fishnet veil over her head, and like her hair kind of looks like whitish feathers, and she's got all the crazy garb, and she's always smoking cigarettes and complaining, and Samantha loves her vibe. They like to make fun of the bunnies together, and so they're thinking that they're on the same page about these girls, but it seems like perhaps Samantha is a little bit in denial about how she feels about them, because while yes, they are super annoying and she probably doesn't like them that much, we get the sense that part of the reason she also doesn't like them is the fact that, you know, she's not accepted into their group, and if they were to extend a warm welcome to her, perhaps she would be open to it. Albeit, I will say that her vibe that we get, you would think would not really be in line with the bunnies. So they make a lot of comments on the type of writing that Samantha does in this program. Apparently is extremely dark and deep and intense, and I think the bunnies are probably scared off a little bit by it. And I think in the program, you know, when they're meant to critique each other's work, it seems like they all kind of just shit on her work, but it's in a weird backhanded compliment type of way. Their type of writing is like so pretentious as to not actually try to even have their writing make sense to their reader. Like, it's just so deep you wouldn't understand, and all the bunnies hype each other up about it. One day, Samantha receives in her school mailbox an envelope addressed to her, and it's like in the shape of like an origami swan, probably decked out in perfume, and it is inviting her to what is called a smut salon by the bunnies, which she's heard them talk about it many times. She's not exactly sure what that entails. She almost thinks it's a joke, like they're making fun of her, and she brings it up to her best friend Ava, like, oh my gosh, can you believe I was invited? But like, kind of almost wanting to go. This is the first time that they've tried to potentially include her in their circle, and so I think she kind of hates herself for wanting to go. But guess what? Of course she does, because you want to know what happens at the smut salon. Why is it called that? So Samantha goes to one of the bunnies' McMansions for this smut salon. And just to give you a little idea of who these different gals are. So they do have real names, but in the book, a lot of the time she refers to them by nicknames that she's given them in her head based on what they remind her of. So we have Cupcake, Creepy Doll Vignette, and the Duchess. One critique that I will give of this book is, so sometimes she refers to them by these nicknames, and then sometimes she refers to them by their actual names, which means that there are now like 8 names that we have to keep track of. And I don't feel like we spend so much time in depth getting to know each of the bunnies individually. So honestly, sometimes I kind of realize, like, I don't really know who anyone is. It didn't affect my enjoyment of the book. I was wondering, like, am I supposed to have more of an understanding of who these girls are and be more invested in their individual characters? And I did read someone's review after the fact, and they're like, honestly, I thought I was dumb because I couldn't keep track of who any of them were. The person was kind of like, you know, it's the author's job to make sure we're really knowing who they are. But I almost feel like it's possible that this could have been intentional, because it really is supposed to give you the vibe that they are sort of a collective and have this sort of group identity. So let's not get too hung up on the individual gals. So Samantha gets to the mansion, and it's super weird. You'll definitely sense that something is off about the bunnies. So she knocks on the door, rings the doorbell, and they make her wait there for 15 minutes, and she can see them looking at her through the window, which is super weird. And so the fact that she stays waiting there for 15 minutes is kind of wild. One thing I also want to note that is commented on a lot is, so despite the fact that the school that they attend is quite elite, the town itself is actually extremely dangerous. This is mentioned multiple times. Apparently there's, like, you know, random afternoon beheadings, like people just getting chopped up left and right, like extreme intense violence, and supposedly it's like almost every day. So the fact that she's just standing on the doorstep for 15 minutes means she is kind of risking getting decapitated. So she must actually really want to attend this party. So what actually happens in the smut salon? So the girls go around and they read each other erotic stories. So because Samantha does not have a story prepared, because they did not tell her she needed to, they start prying into her life, trying to get a story, an erotic story. They seem to think that because her stories are like violent and dark, they think that she must have a lot under the surface going on to her. She must have some crazy stories. The whole vibe of the interaction, it feels like, you know, girls that are really like fake happy to see you, very high-pitched voice, and they're wanting to dig into your life and know all this information about you, but you sense that as soon as you walk away, they're gonna pick apart every single thing you said and shit all over it. That's the energy here that we have. The story that she shares is kind of a weird one. When she was in high school, she was in a play with this boy named Rob Valencia, who she had an insane crush on. And in this play, I guess they're both supposed to kind of like die together. And so in rehearsals, they'd like die, but then they'd be like kind of pressed up against each other, dead. And she was like, oh, dying with him was the most erotic thing, like way more erotic than having sex. I could die with Rob Valencia 1,002 times. And the other girls are like, oh my God, tell me more. He sounds so hot. What he did, blah, 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 shma, blah, blah. And so they're all kind of getting off on the story, wanting details about him. And they really collect as much information as they can about Rob Valencia. And I don't know, all of it feels very agenda-y. So the bunnies are supplying Samantha with a large quantity of alcohol, drink after drink after drink. And then they tell her how they typically end the smut salon by asking her to go outside and get them a bunny, like catch a bunny for them, hunt a bunny for them. And Samantha's disoriented and like, wait, what? Like, you're not serious, are you? And they're like, well, yeah, you just go outside and get a bunny. Like, what? Like, why are you being weird? And it's a weird request, and Samantha doesn't know what to make of it. And she doesn't do it because she's not sure if they're serious. And when she gets home that night, she's honestly not even sure how she gets home. And on her windowsill, like on the outside of her window, she sees a bunny. And then on campus, she starts seeing a lot of bunnies. And so it's one of those things where you don't know, is it just now that bunnies are on your radar, you're seeing them everywhere? Or if there's something strange going on, it's not quite clear. But now the bunnies, every time they see her in class, like, oh, Samantha, hi, hey. Because now they're girls, I guess. After the smut salon, Samantha notices that she cannot find her friend Ava, and Ava is not responding to her texts. And she's kind of freaking out. She's searching everywhere for her, and she's getting really worried. Eventually, one day she does find her, and Ava's acting like it's no big thing. Nothing's wrong. Don't be weird. And Samantha thinks that maybe Ava is mad at her for having gone and hung out with the bunnies, even though they detest them. And Ava's like, Samantha, I don't even care. It's not that serious. I don't even care who you hang out with. And then Samantha's all wounded by it, and they kind of go their separate ways. So there's kind of this divide that starts happening between Samantha and Ava because of Samantha's newfound like friendship, I guess, with the bunnies. And I do want to mention that Samantha's living situation and kind of how she lives very differently from the bunnies. She's pretty poor. Her apartment is pretty gnarly. She has a man who's like flashing his genitals at her on the fire escape every night. It's like that level of quality of an apartment building. And so a lot of the time she actually stays with Ava at Ava's house, and it's kind of sort of like she lives with Ava. So her friendship with the bunnies impacting their friendship is also kind of a weird thing because generally they kind of sort of live together. So Samantha is invited to what the bunnies are calling prom night at the McMansion, and they're all, dressed to the nines. They have their corsages, and they braid Samantha's hair in a crazy topsy-turvy way. They kind of are making her into their own image. And when Samantha goes into the main area of the party, there are these gentlemen guests there. And this is when we really start to realize that something is so off about what's going on here, but we don't quite know what it is. So there are multiple male characters at this party whose names are like Beowulf or Lars, and the verbiage that they are using and the way they are communicating is absolutely crazy. So the bunnies introduce the men to Samantha. They'll all say her name at the same time, like, Samantha, tell us about you, Samantha. Tell us everything, Samantha. Samantha, we want to listen. Samantha, we're dying to know. While all of this is happening, Samantha is hearing screams in another part of the house. She's like, do you guys hear that screaming? And the guy is like, your beauty is like screaming, Samantha. No one really wants to acknowledge it, and then there's a knock at the door, and the bunnies are like, oh, you should go get that, Samantha. I believe it is a guest for you. She goes to the door, opens it, and who is it? None other than her high school crush, Rob Valencia, who she died with 1,000,002 times, and it was very, very erotic, and he is at the front door ready for prom night. She is absolutely mind-boggled. But Rob Valencia, he too is a bit off like everything in this book. Samantha's interaction with Rob Valencia is so unhinged. So I feel like I kind of just have to read some of the passages on this one to fully convey the the full impact. And so she's super surprised to see him, and she's expressing that. And he's like, it surprises you. And she's like, yes, very much. I can't believe it. And he's like, believe, Samantha, please. It makes sex faster. Which, like, what? And she and him start talking about the girl that he ended up actually taking to prom back in high school, because he did not take Samantha. And he says, do you know, Samantha, I do not even masturbate to the memory of fucking her in the mermaid limo. Yes, Samantha. In fact, the whole time I was dancing in Alyssa Whatever's unmagical arms, the whole time I was fucking other women in various venues, but mostly my car, I was still thinking this is not at all erotic at all. And how much infinitely better, how much infinitely hotter it would be to die by electrocution with Samantha Heather Mackey. Because we died like we were fucking, didn't we, Samantha? Samantha, I found your tree-like height erotic, and I enjoyed your bleak dress sense more than I can say. All day, I wanted to tongue the little skull pin you wore on your boob, yet I did not. And it continues on like that. It sure does. It sure does. At one point, she even gets a little teary-eyed. He's like, there is no need for all the eye water. So very robotic, very much like, I feel like, is this Rob Valencia? Was this Rob Valencia's vibe back in high school? Because I'm going to guess not. At this point, it gets even stranger. So Samantha realizes that all of the bunny's dates have started chewing on parts of the bunny's dress. So like their pearl necklace or part of their dress, like the men are like nibbling. And then she feels that Rob Valencia is gnawing on her corsage. So weird. So when Samantha is calling Rob out and trying to get him to stop, all of a sudden it seems like he kind of glitches. He's like malfunctioning because he becomes enraged. But all of the words he begins to say do not sound like Rob Valencia's words. All of the complaints that he is voicing about her all seem like they very likely would have come from the bunnies themselves, because he's verbalizing some of like the exact critiques that the bunnies have given her about her writing in the writing workshop. And then he's like complaining like, we tried to braid your hair, you weren't even excited for us to braid your hair, which the bunnies had been trying to do earlier. And so this is all coming out of Rob's mouth. So this is very clearly no longer a book that's like fully taking place in reality, but we don't fully understand what it is that's happening. So he continues to berate her. He's using her full first, middle, last name every time he's berating her, which just makes it an additional flavor of odd. And eventually she's like, go, get out. And at this point, upon her telling him to leave, Rob Valencia's head explodes. His head explodes and blood goes everywhere. After Rob Valencia's head explodes, Samantha ends up like waking up at night in her bed, and she doesn't really know how she got there. And in the writing workshop the next day, the bunnies are all very, very nice to her, and they invite her out to go get mini food, because that is something they do. They go to this restaurant that only serves mini little items, and they eat all their mini little items, and they want to talk to Samantha about what she thinks she saw last night, because like, no, his head didn't explode. Like, we understand why you think you saw his head explode, like, you little silly. They veer the conversation to how they know that Samantha has writer's block and that she hasn't been writing recently, and that everything she's sharing is stuff she's written in the past. And luckily for her, they are currently working on a project that would address this issue. And this whole conversation becomes so unclear. They're using really flowery, weird verbiage. They're trying to get Samantha on board with their project and talk a lot about their project without saying anything about what this project actually is. It's innovative, experimental, performance-based, intertextual, so intertextual, basically a hybrid. So like, what does that mean? And it goes way beyond genre. It subverts the whole concept of a genre and gender narratives and the patriarchy of language. not to mention the whole writing medium. Like, this project, wild, wow. So we know so much about it, except no, we don't. They're convincing Samantha that their project will make her feel very creative, very empowered. It's hard to say no to it because you don't know what you're saying no to. You're just gonna kind of roll with it. So they invite Samantha over so that they can do this workshop, which is what they call the time they're spending on this creative endeavor. And once there, they all go up into the attic. And in the attic, Samantha notices there is an axe in the corner. And she's not quite sure why, but that seems a little alarming. So one of the bunnies presents to the rest of the group an actual bunny, a real live bunny, and she brings it into the middle of the room, and they're all like, oh my God, so cute, whatever. Once they have this bunny in place, they all get in a circle and they hold hands. And nothing happens at first, but then after a couple minutes, the lights go out, there's like a gust of wind, the curtains catch on fire, and all of the sudden, the bunny explodes. The bunny explodes all over them. There's bunny blood and guts everywhere, and I hate when things happen to animals. And Samantha is horrified. Why do things keep exploding on her? My goodness. All of a sudden, they hear a ringing of the doorbell. And so one of them goes down to get it. And at the door is this man. He's a beautiful, handsome man, but he has this like botched hair lip, and he has these gloves on that look like, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with his hands underneath the gloves. There's just a couple things about him that are kind of questionable. And he greets them in French, and all of a sudden, he just starts screaming bloody murder. And the bunnies are like, oh, damn it, again, okay, fine. All right, go ahead and take care of this one. So one of the girls grabs the man, she brings him into another room, while carrying the axe, and it doesn't sound too good while they're in the other room. And she comes out and she's covered in blood, but she's like, oh, I think I made a mistake. And then this man runs out, and he looks like kind of furry, like part man, part like floppy something ears, I don't know, is he part bunny? And he's still screaming bloody murder, and so she picks up the axe and she axes this man to death. And so we are being exposed to the bunny's process. We are being given more information about, like, I guess what is off here. This is certainly very off, but we are still very thoroughly like, what the fuck? Like, I get that you're telling me what they're doing, but also, what are they doing? I don't know. So we find that the bunnies are making these boys from bunnies, and they're referring to them as like hybrids. And some of them, are just first drafts, but they are basically channeling their mental energy toward creating these men who embody certain qualities that they like. Like, so this last guy, they were, really wanting to make sure he was French. And sometimes they'll want someone who's like, construction worker, but also like pianist, but also French, like whatever, just like these weird sort of qualities that they all shove into one man. And they are certainly giving these men identity crises. And when they ask for Samantha's input, we start to notice that it seems like she is not fully herself anymore. As she's been hanging out with the bunnies, they're constantly giving her alcohol, and they're also giving her these little Tic Tacs that appear to be drugs. And she seems to be very sort of submissive to the other bunnies and go along with whatever they say. So despite how horrified she is at, bunnies and men exploding and being axed, they'll be like, what do you think, Samantha? And she's like, no, I think the next one, he should have a scarf. You're right. So she's not providing a whole lot of resistance to this process, but it seems that a lot of the qualities that she had before she was really immersed in the bunnies, it seems like she's losing herself. And so we now find that at school, she will be immersed in these bunny group hugs where they are gonna squish each other till their organs explode, and she's being called Bunny and she's calling the other ones Bunny. And honestly, it starts to seem as though there is some sort of psychic link between the bunnies, because sometimes they don't have to say anything and they will know what the other one is thinking, and not just in a way of like they know each other so well, but like someone will think something and the other person will respond to it out loud or something to that effect. But one day, they're all eating their like little mini foods and they're just a full little bunny cult. Afterwards, Samantha is walking with the bunnies and someone like grabs her from behind and she's freaking out and she's looking at this woman like, what the hell? What is this person trying to do to me? And they're like, gosh, she looks kind of familiar. I don't know. And it is her best friend Ava, who she genuinely barely even recognizes because she is so far down the rabbit hole. Oh, I was already saying that before I realized rabbit bunny. Okay, she's so far down the rabbit hole with the bunnies that she is completely out of touch with who she was and what her old life was. So she doesn't even really remember Ava. And Ava's like, what have they done to you? It's clear that she thinks that they've brainwashed Samantha and she's really concerned about her. So Ava takes Samantha, who she is afraid has been brainwashed by the bunnies. She takes her away from them without them realizing it. She literally came up behind her and was like, don't breathe, don't scream, don't make a move kind of thing. So she kind of sort of casually kidnapped her a little bit. And the farther that she's able to get Samantha away from the bunnies, the more Samantha is kind of able to get in touch with her original identity and personality and thoughts, even though she still does feel very fuzzy. And she's sort of like, I don't know what's going on. I got caught up. I'm sorry. Like, so part of her like still is experiencing like this like psychic link with the bunnies, and she still is like kind of drawn towards that. But the real part of her that is truly Samantha is drawn to Ava and, their friendship and the life that they had together. And so she's very conflicted. And eventually the bunnies find her after like blowing up her phone, which she was ignoring, and they are freaking out like, oh my god, Bunny, you're kidnapped, Bunny, oh my god. And Ava makes up some weird excuse like, oh yeah, no, she was like about to be attacked by like a wolf boy and I saved her. And they're like, oh my god, really? And so it's a weird interaction. But while some of the bunnies are talking to Samantha, one of the bunnies pulls Ava away and she says something to Ava. And after she says this, Ava leaves. But now Samantha is panicking because she doesn't really want to be left behind with the bunnies. And now that Ava has gone, she doesn't know where she's gone and she's freaking out and she doesn't want to be at the bunnies anymore. And so at this point, I would like to make a note of another character in the story, Jonah. I quite like Jonah. He is also at the same school as Samantha. He's also in a grad program, but I think it's for poetry. And he is kind of in love with Samantha, but in like a very non-pressuring, casual way where it just seems like he really wants to spend time with her, but he doesn't really put any effort into like making it seem like he's trying to pursue romance. He just like genuinely like likes her and likes being around her. And he's, I don't want to say like a pushover, but kind of. So Samantha runs into him while she's kind of panicking and trying to follow Ava because she wants to know whatever one of the bunnies just said to her, and she wants to be away from the bunny. So she's trying to find Ava and she runs into Jonah, and Jonah offers to give her a ride if she needs it somewhere. She takes him up on this, and then this just leads to him literally driving all over town and her making him stop in a bunch of random spots where she thinks Ava could be, not even telling him like what or who she's looking for. So he's just kind of going along with it. And Jonah has done a lot of drugs in the past, and so his brain is a little fried, it seems like. So he's just kind of like, do, whatever you say. And she keeps looking for Ava and she cannot find her. So with no Ava in sight, Samantha goes back to the bunny's house. And while she's outside, before she enters, she sees a beautiful, majestic stag. And she just feels it's noteworthy. It's kind of taken up some mental space for her. And once she goes inside, the bunnies tell her that they would like her to lead workshop tonight, meaning she is going to be the one using all of her mental energy to transform a bunny into one of their hybrid drafts. They also call them their darlings, like, and say like, you know, sometimes you have to kill your darlings. And so they are wanting Samantha to do this. And Samantha has no idea if this is something she can do. And I don't think she really wants to, but what are you gonna do? You don't say no to the bunnies. And so they bring her a kind of bizarre, fucked up looking bunny, and she is trying. And this goes on for so long. She's trying for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. And the bunnies are like, I don't know, they're just being weird and passive aggressive. And they're like, oh, I mean, it happens. Like it's never happened, but like, it could happen. Well, I mean, yeah, because like, I guess it is happening. And so they're just making her feel hella bad. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like this identity crisis of like, oh my God, am I not a bunny? Do I not belong to the bunnies? I'm not one of them. So after this, one of the bunnies is like, whatever, I'm leaving. And as she's going outside, she calls them, she's like, you guys, look. And out over by the bus stop, there is a guy. And it seems like he very much could be Samantha's bunny boy. So the bunnies are confused because they're like, but normally they always come to the door. He wasn't at the door. So they're not sure, like, is he a boy? Is he a bunny boy? We don't know. And they're thinking maybe don't just ask him if he's a bunny or a boy. And so he's hot. He's real hot. He's like feisty, spicy, alternative vibe. He has like an axe tattooed on his neck. Like he definitely looks like something that Samantha would have liked to cook up in the oven, but she's not for sure if it's him or not. And so they're kind of trying to hint and see if maybe he'll give them answers by being like, did you see a bunny go by? And I'd be like, a bunny? He'll be like, well, yes, actually, I did see a bunny. It went that way. Well, actually, like a wolf grabbed it and dragged it around and murdered it and like all this like gory detail. And so it's like, I don't know, is he fucking with us? We don't know. And all the girls like introduce themselves to him because they all think he's really hot. But basically he gets on the bus and he goes, and we don't know if he is a bunny boy or not. So because this boy didn't stick around, the other bunnies are thinking that this man was not created by Samantha. And so what that means to them is she is not one of them. And so it's like, you can't sit with us kind of thing, where they're not really that welcoming of her into the group anymore. But like, because she still kind of has this psychic link, she like can like feel all the energy that they have going between each other, but she's just kind of left out, and it's a little sad. Not to mention it is about to be the holiday break, and Samantha's family situation is not great. Her mom is dead. Her dad is like, he did some illegal shit and he's like hiding from authorities. So she doesn't really have family that she gets to spend time with during the holidays. So it's just kind of a sad time for her, not to mention the fact that she still has not been able to get in contact with Ava. And one thing that's kind of crazy is that even though they kind of technically live together, you know, Samantha was always staying at Ava's house, once the bunnies infiltrated her mind, she kind of couldn't even really remember where the house was, so she couldn't go back to Ava's house to like check on her, which is crazy. So yeah, her memory was all fucked up from everything that's happened. So during the holiday break, all the bunnies go on their wonderful holiday vacations and she's just stuck in town. So Samantha's in a shitty place. She doesn't have her bunnies, she doesn't have Ava, she doesn't have her family. At one point, she goes grocery shopping and she does actually see her bunny boy. And he appears to be stealing every single item in the store, like just shoving it all in his coat. Like he has like a coat that has an endless expanse of room on the inside of it because he's putting literally everything in the store in his coat. And he even sees her and kind of makes like a funny little winky cutesy eye contact with her, but just kind of keeps on doing his thing. And so she's just like, she just doesn't know what to make of it. But at a different point, she decides, no, I really need to find Ava. So she gets on a bus and she tells the bus driver like, hey, I'll know it when I see it in terms of like where I'm getting off, because she's trying to find Ava's house, but she does not remember where it is. Because interestingly enough, once she started really getting tight with the bunnies, the memory of where she lived with Ava just kind of disappears. So she doesn't know where that house actually was. And while she's on the bus, she runs into her bunny boy again. He's like, did you ever find your bunny, Samantha? So we don't know if he's like coy and knows he's a bunny boy and is just being cutesy about it. After Bunny Boy gets off at his stop, Samantha's gonna follow him because she's still trying to figure out the situation. And she's walking behind him, it's dark out, and at one point she's like, wait, what? How are we here? He literally led her to Ava's house. And when she goes to ask him, like, why are we here? He's gone. He's disappeared. But he led her to Ava's house. So it just feels like, I don't know, feels like there's some kind of psychic link between him and her, but we just don't even know what's going on, okay? So Samantha knocks on Ava's door, and Ava's happy to see her, and she's been wondering what happened to her, and she's been kind of freaking out. Samantha is going to be living with Ava again and kind of getting into a new routine post bunny life. And she's been staying there for a while when all of the sudden one day she sees her bunny boy in Ava's house, and Ava draws it to her attention that apparently she let a lodger stay with them. Like, they have a new roommate that has been staying in the room that Samantha used to stay in. So he's just usually out at the hours that Samantha would normally be in. So she like hasn't known that he's been living with them. But not only is Bunny Boy her roommate, when he sees Ava, he's like, oh, hey, babe. And they start like Frenching in front of her because apparently they're in love and they've been dating. And is her best friend dating her bunny boy? It's so crazy because he is doing so many things that you're like, this has to be her bunny boy. His specialty dish is like cooking rabbit. When Samantha is looking at him, he will often look like his features are like morphing into all these different features, and they're features that belong to different men that were like noteworthy in her life or that she was attracted to, because the whole idea is that her bunny boy is like a template of all these different sort of ideas of what she's liked. And so she is seeing all the people that are noteworthy to her, and like, you know, whether it's music he likes or jokes he makes, it's all stuff that feels like it has come from within her mind. So she feels pretty confident that this is her bunny, but she doesn't know how to tell Ava without sounding insane. Because Samantha needs some more information, at one point when Ava and Bunny Boy are not home, she goes into Bunny Boy's room, and in it she finds a couple interesting things. She finds a list with email addresses and passwords for like all of the bunnies, which, why do we have that? And then in his phone, which he left there, she finds some very curious text conversations, including conversations with the bunnies. So between Bunny Boy, his name is Max, Bunny Boy Max, and the other gal bunnies, and she's seeing some sexts as well as some naked photos of the bunnies, because apparently he's been hollering at the bunny girls. What's he doing? Amidst all of this, Samantha receives an email from the teacher of her, fiction writing program saying there is an emergency mandatory writing workshop that she needs to come to that evening. So question mark, we don't know what that is. So during this workshop, it seems that this whole thing was orchestrated by Bunny Boy. One of the girls shows up late, and she's like, but I thought it started at 5:11. And like, the teacher's like, why would I start a meeting at 5:11? It's because Max, Bunny Boy, is all up in the emails. He's just causing chaos. But all four of the bunnies show up, but they show up separately, and they do not look like their normal selves. They're not quite acting like their normal selves either. And each of them comes in with a white box, and it is related to what they are going to be presenting to the group. Now, they all just have weird shit that they're presenting. One of them presents like this doll, and it's like weird looking and bizarre, and it seems like it's a shout out at the fact that the nickname that Samantha has for one of the bunnies is Creepy Doll. One of the bunnies, all over her body, has carved into her, it says, "Eat me," all over it. I think Max carved that into her. I think, one of the bunnies just looks fucked. Her hair is fucked up. All her, she has bruises all over her. Basically, Max Bunny Boy did all of these things to all of these girls, and they're basically showcasing it as performance art. One of them has a poem that's too complex for you to understand, and it's just too high level, but it's supposed to be sexual, and she's making weird grunting noises during her poem, which she calls proems, which is like prose poem. It's just this whole thing. The bunnies are not seeming to be supportive of each other anymore, because one of the bunnies, in response to the shitty poem, is like, okay, you're just trying to be deep. Like, what are you saying? Why don't you just tell us what you actually did with him? And like, why is that so hard? Why do you need us to guess at what happened? All the girls are getting kind of like snippy with each other. But guess what else? I guess Max Bunny Boy, he has introduced himself to the bunnies separately using different names. So the bunnies do not realize that they are all being played by the same man. After this, Samantha rushes back to Ava's house and she is interrogating Max and trying to figure out, like, what are you doing? Are you just like trying to turn them against each other or what? And she wants him to basically explicitly say that he's her bunny, and she's just trying to like kind of like shake him, like, come on, give me more information. And he's very lackadaisical about the whole thing. He's not giving her too much information, and she's trying to find out, like, does he actually like the bunnies? Like, what's going on? And like, he seems to be pretty grossed out by the bunnies, to be honest. It seems like he's definitely being intentional about playing with them and fucking with them. And she's like, what about Ava? Haven't you thought about her? And his whole demeanor totally changes when he's thinking and talking about Ava. He does seem to truly love her. It's not like he's fucking with Ava in order to fuck with Samantha. And so what we're gathering is, like, this is her bunny, but he feels the way she feels. She hates the bunnies and is angry at them, and they kind of, you know, got all up in her core and fucked her up, and you know, they don't have good intentions towards her, even when they, you know, pretend that they do sometimes. And so he has that same animosity towards the bunnies. Meanwhile, Samantha absolutely adores Ava, and so it seems that Max does as well. Now, while they are just hanging out at home, the three of them, at one point Samantha sees in the window that one of the bunnies is there, and she is watching them, and the bunny is seeing that Max is, you know, making out with Ava, and she is just horrified, in shock and awe, because in her mind that's her man. So she is not pleased. At this point, Samantha just cannot keep the knowledge of Max's bunnyhood to herself anymore, and she does end up telling Ava and acknowledges that she knows it sounds very crazy. And Ava seems to, like, at first kind of just laugh it off, like, thinks, like, okay. Like, she thinks she's just fucking with her. And then at a certain point, she realizes that, like, oh shit, like, Samantha actually believes this and feels kind of bad for her. And at this point, Samantha is actually told by her professor and one of the other professors at the school that she needs to come in for a mandatory meeting, and so she doesn't really want to leave amidst this weird conversation. But Ava's kind of like, yeah, maybe you should go, because she's kind of weirded out. And Samantha's like, hey, can you promise me that you're gonna be here when I get back? Because for whatever reason, she has just like a kind of weird feeling, a foreboding, foreshadowing feeling. So Samantha goes to the meeting, and once she's there, everything is dark at the school, and she can hear the professors talking to her, but like they're in the dark, and she's like, I can't see you. And then she feels a hand in front of her mouth, like cupping over her, like, so she's inhaling some drugs. And when she wakes up, the professors are there, and they're like looking all hair lippy, kind of furry, kind of bunny-ish. They're like the bunny versions of themselves. I think it must be that they can create a duplicate rather than making the person who already exists a weird bunny version of themselves. So it seems like the bunnies have created these two professors into bunny version professors, and they have Samantha tied up. So when she wakes up, she's tied up. And honestly, during this time, the professors kind of just talk shit on her and like her potential and her writing. And it's kind of just weird. And they're like, should we even let her go home? And it's interesting because like you think at first like, oh, they're gonna kill her, but then they're like, no, I guess we're just gonna leave. We're just gonna leave with her tied up. It's like, okay, what is the purpose of this? This feels like somebody wanted to get you out of the way for a minute. I don't know. She is able to get untied by the janitor, who's just like very like annoyed and like not fazed by the fact that she's like tied up, and he thinks it's like a part of performance art because everyone at that school is just weird and like that is something that they would do. So Samantha ends up going home, and when she gets home, she sees a very horrible sight. She sees Max covered in blood around a pool of blood on the ground. And in that pool of blood is a swan with an axe through its neck. And Samantha's like, what have you done? What is this? Where's Ava? And Max looks really distraught, and he's like, she told me to go. I don't know why, but she said she wanted to be alone. And after I left, I just had a really bad feeling, and I came back here. And so at first we're thinking that like maybe she tried to break up with him and then he killed her or something, but then the swan, question mark, question mark. So we are reflecting back onto the time when Samantha and Ava first met. And we had heard this memory earlier in the story, but once upon a time, Samantha used to go down to the park by the pond where there would be this swan, and she'd, just watch it. She was really lonely. She didn't have family. She didn't have friends. And so she was pretty miserable in school until she met Ava. And so she was just, looking at this swan, kind of just really up in her loneliness, really wishing that she had a friend. And lo and behold, Ava comes and just sits down next to her on the bench, and they just start talking, and it's like they've always known each other, and they just click, and from there on out, they are inseparable. And she remembers after Ava sat down, she looked over and she didn't notice the swan anymore. We are starting to realize that Bunny Boy Max is not the first hybrid that Samantha has created. It appears that unknowingly, she created Ava from that swan. And so it's not like she just needs bunnies, she just needs an animal. And so then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, so she would always describe her her hair as like these like white feathers. And it is interesting because honestly, the whole story, I was thinking she was kind of like in love with Ava, to be honest. The way she talked about her, it felt a lot more intense and passionate than like the way you normally talk about your friends. So now upon realizing that we think she may have created her, it makes a lot more sense why that connection is so deep. And no, it is not Max who killed Ava. It is apparent that the whole thing with the bunny teachers was meant to get Samantha out of the way so that the bunny who saw Max and Ava together could go and kill Ava with the axe that she normally uses to kill the bunny boys. Max ends up realizing that the reason Ava asked him to leave is he didn't know that Samantha had just told Ava that Max was a bunny boy. So maybe she kind of did realize that she believed her, because I don't know, I think that Max knows he's a bunny boy, so Ava must have known she's a swan girl, I suppose. But after this, Max grabs the axe out from Swan Ava and he runs out the door because it is clear he wants some revenge, okay? Samantha runs after Max as he is on his way to the bunny gal's house. And when he gets there, it's kind of funny because all four bunnies run out and they're all referring to him by a different name and all excited because they all think that like they're his girl. And so then they're realizing that all of them think that, and then they're getting like snippy with each other and they're not being so bunny about things. He and Samantha are both pissed. Samantha is trying to get the one bunny, Duchess, to admit what she's done, to admit that she killed Ava. And she's not like admitting it in so many words, but they start talking about like how they were kind of embarrassed for Samantha because I guess they all realized that Ava was, a result of Samantha's creation, and they thought like, oh, how embarrassing for you that you didn't even realize she's like basically imaginary. So at this point, Max is wanting to kill the bunnies. I don't think Samantha really wants him to. And yet Samantha kind of wants to kill the bunnies. And yet she doesn't really want to, because that's not really who she is. She's not like a violent person. Max has a different idea. And because they have this psychic link between them, Samantha knows what he wants her to do. And this part's so crazy. So she had taken the axe from him. And at this point, she goes and she runs at him with the axe, and she starts axing Max because all the bunnies are obsessed with him. So this is like the true revenge is, you know, you killed someone that I love. Now I'm going to kill someone that all of you love. And the difference being too is that Max, like, this was his idea. He wanted Samantha to do this and to kill him. Now, we find out that Max is not actually a bunny boy. Right before Max was made, Samantha had been right outside of the house and seen that beautiful stag, so that was all up in her mental space. So Max was actually made out of this beautiful, majestic stag. So she axes him and he turns into a stag, but he is not dead yet. So he proceeds to like thrash and go crazy, and he like demolishes the bunnies, like knocking them around and like hoofing them and like throwing them across everywhere. And they're like seriously injured, and all of their like bones are getting broken before he dies. He is still gonna die, but he's gotta like make his powerful exit first. Can we just acknowledge that he had that axe tattoo on the side of his neck? So it almost felt like sort of like premonition, I suppose. And I guess also just the nature of him being created through this process where they're often having to, you know, axe their bunny boys. And so she too has to kill her darling. And after this, kind of anticlimactic, because since he's like a human made out of an animal, and since Ava was as well, it's not like there's really any sort of like police investigation or anything like that that needs to go on. So life kind of resumes as normal, I guess as normal as it can. And at this point, it is actually graduation time from the graduate writing program. And so all of the bunnies are in all these casts because all of their bones have been broken, but they do still graduate and they are still being bunny. Now, Samantha is feeling very lonely. She doesn't have her bunny boy, she doesn't have Ava, and she's not friends with the bunnies. So she's very lonely, but I guess there's still sort of that sense of peace that comes with, I don't know, I guess learning a lot about yourself, perhaps, question mark, I don't know. The ending is kind of curious because she ends up talking to Jonah, you know, the one who I said is also in a graduate program at her school. He's kind of like fried his brain on drugs, but he's very sweet and kind and cares for Samantha. So Samantha and Jonah decide to go to the park where she first met Ava, and they're looking at a swan in the pond. She's kind of reflecting on her loneliness, and Jonah mentions something about being her friend, and she realizes, like, you know what, yeah, like, I am glad to have you as a friend. And he's asking her, like, what now? And she's not really sure what she's gonna do after graduation, but at this point she's thinking she's gonna go back home and like sit on the roof and look at the raccoons, which is something her and Ava used to do together a lot. And Jonah says, like, oh, that sounds fun. And she says, you could come too if you want. And then let me just like read you these last couple lines. So she says, you could come with me, I say to Jonah, if you want. I lower my gaze to the mud. Sure, Samantha, says the mud. I'd love to. So. Then you're like, is Jonah real or is Jonah imaginary too? And does she create people out of mud? Does she create people out of things that are not animals? Or is it the idea that like everything in life is a creation of her imagination? Oh, now there are definitely some extra things sprinkled throughout this book that I think are worth mentioning. One of those things is that when Samantha was growing up, her mom was constantly commenting on how much she was living in her imagination, because Samantha was always like writing stories ever since she was a little girl. And that's nothing too like unusual, but I guess the extent to which her imagination went and the content of the stories, like a lot of teachers were concerned about her And her mom, like, she has memories of her mom shaking her, being like, you need to stop this. And so it seems like perhaps the imagination / fantasy land that she was living in may not have just been dark, but like may have been to the point where she was like no longer living in reality. In addition to that, there is also this scene when she's on the bus where she comments on a homeless woman who was reading a poster about schizophrenia and like reading off each of the symptoms, like, oh, I have that. Oh, I have that. Like this lady just seeming delighted to like basically realize she probably has schizophrenia. And so a lot of people who have read this book do speculate that everything can be tied up with the bow of Samantha's mental health issues and that she's schizophrenic. And so all of this is just sort of her hallucinations, which, you know, honestly, a lot of the time I do really like when books adhere to the rules of reality. But I think even though, yes, she's potentially an unreliable narrator, I don't really like taking everything that happened in this book and trying to package it in a way that is palatable for us, because I don't know, I feel like the magic realism theme to all of it, I liked that being the theme and not just being hallucinations. However, if it is schizophrenia, I do think it's a powerful story for us to kind of experience what that could be like in a way where we know it doesn't make sense, and yet we are like taking it for what it is and feeling like it is happening. But I don't know, the the last thing with the mud, that was, yeah, I don't know. And so ultimately I don't fully understand the bunny's intentions. So I'm thinking that what one of them whispered to Ava when Ava ran off probably was something about how Samantha had created Ava. And so since they realized Ava was a result of Samantha's creativity and her process, I'm assuming that they wanted her to be a part of their workshop because they were not having the best luck with all the bunny boys they were creating, who were always like glitching out and also missing penises, by the way. Their bunnies, they could never create men with penises, just FYI. And so because of all their glitches that they were having, that maybe they were hoping that Samantha would be the powerhouse that would allow them to create what they were actually looking to create. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious, like, at what point did they fully like realize that Ava was her creation? And was that like right when they finally decided to invite her to the smut salon? And also, it seems like Samantha had some memories of like maybe one of the bunnies before she was like in the bunny clique, where her personality seemed kind of different too. So I'm like, this whole psychic link thing that they all have going on, I don't know. I'm just so intrigued by it all. So many questions. I'm erring on the side of like choosing to not believe that it was just schizophrenia, but I really do think you get to make that choice for yourself, because no matter what you think, it's not going to be confirmed or denied. I really like the general premise of this book. Like, I know a lot of people comment on it being like dark academia, but like I feel like it's just in such another realm beyond that, that there's just so much more to it. It just feels very creative. It's very unique. A lot of people really do not like that this book doesn't make sense and that you don't get answers. And there are some people who are like, okay, yes, magical realism is all good and fine, and I'm happy to go along for the ride of whatever, you know, universe the author wants to create, but you need to create rules for that universe and explain them and adhere to them. But like with this one, there's really no explanation or rules. It's just kind of like whatever happens. I like this book because there is like part of the element of kind of horror to it, because, you know, there is violence, there's exploding heads and people getting axed and whatnot, but it's not like overly violent constantly. And there's so many other elements. Like, it's also comedic. Like the way they talk to each other and interact is pretty funny. So I don't know, it's just such a unique vibe. It's not like, oh my gosh, this was such an amazing book, like shouting from the rooftops. No, but it was like, I've heard a lot about this book and I don't feel like I was disappointed by it. I feel like it has some good stuff to offer. Are you one of the people that hated this book, or did you love this book? Is it schizophrenia? Is it not? What do you think? Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.